Hey guys, so sorry that was an abrupt break between two different videos, but as I said, my internet since the outage has been kind of shoddy right now, so the internet went down. So hopefully we won't do it again right now, but if it does, I'll just make another video on this. So it won't be much longer, probably like 10 minutes more. So anyhow, where I left off is Maddie Michael, sorry, who's walking around in a desperate situation, carrying her at night in this city, walking around with a big suitcase and carrying her little baby Basil around and searching for a place to stay. She has nowhere to go right now, runs into an older woman outside of her fairly nice house there in the city, and strike up a conversation. And as I said, this is kind of one of those get in fiction, a miracle coming out of nowhere thing, the kindness of a stranger, because after this, they're striking up the conversation. Eva Turner, the woman, the older woman, takes has sympathizes with Maddie and takes her in, lets her stay for the night, and lets her stay for another night. And as time goes on, and what you get is kind of a passage of time for several pages. Maddie Michael, she's just letting Maddie Michael live with her. And the idea is Eva Turner has a little granddaughter who's also Basil's same age. And they become very close. And they live like a family together. And it's a really wonderful middle portion of this story where, and I hate to say it, Gloria Naylor gives us this kind of sense of comfort for Maddie Michael, something you feel like she deserves. That this kind of this such good luck. I mean, it's a nice house she's living in with a nice woman who has a daughter who's the same age as Basil, so they can grow up together. Built-in security, childcare. They help each other out, and further, we learn, and this moves on. If you want to go to like page 38 to 39, as time passes, we're talking another year, they're, basically Maddie Michael it's kind of her house now too, in a way. And we learn that Eva has been not asking, Eva, the woman who owns the house, has not been asking Maddie Michael to give her any rent, to help, any rent or boarding fee or anything. And it turns out that she's just this very generous, nice person. When I first read this story, I kept waiting for the bad thing to happen, like she turns out to be like a psychopath, or, is going to be horrible to Maddie Michael. No, that's not the case. They just become really good friends, and Eva cares. This a white woman, a southern white woman, cares for Maddie Michael and doesn't ask for rent or anything. All that she asks Maddie Michael to do is to set aside the money she would normally pay for rent into her bank account and save it. And the idea is that when Eva dies, she'd be able to have the money to pay the house off, and the house would be hers, and to take care of the two children, her child and Basil. And so as time is passing, and Basil's about 5 years old, you get a telling scene that Gloria Naylor depicts here, where, and it's again between pages 38 39, where Eva confronts Maddie about how Maddie never really does anything for herself. Never goes out, never goes to the movies, never spends any money on just herself. She just works every day, and dotes on Basil, including Eva's wondering, when are you going to find a man? You need somebody who's not just Basil in your life, your child. And this is making Maddie all defensive. Anything to do with her boy, Basil, makes her defensive. And she keeps insisting everything I do is for my boy. Eva is insisting, he's going to be fine. He's got a place now. You don't have to worry about rats. You don't have to worry about that stuff. But no, Maddie May wants to just live for her boy in a sense. And Eva presses her on how she doesn't think it's a healthy relationship. And the one thing she points out is how Basil sleeps with Maddie May all the time still. And he's 5 years old. He doesn't sleep in his own room. And Maddie May, this is a quarter of the way down the page, says he's afraid of the dark. You know that. And Eva responds, most children are afraid at first, but they get used to it. And Maddie says, I'm not going to have my child screaming his head off all night just to please you. He's still a baby. He's 5 years old. He doesn't like sleeping alone, and that's it, she said through her clenched teeth. 5 years old ain't no baby, Miss Eva said. And then she added mildly, you sure it's Basil who don't want to sleep alone? Meaning, you sure it's not you who just needs him around? And here she's pointing out something that's, you know, good psychology here. Are you sure you're not coddling him so much that he's not even sleeping in his own room? Not so much that he's afraid you you don't want to be alone kind of idea. And what's being pointed out here is something I showed earlier is kind of how it's not necessarily healthy to dote your whole life on your child, which is what Maddie Michael is doing here. And then they talk about how, you know, Maddie's saving up a lot of money because she doesn't have to pay rent and everything, which is good. And you get then a big passage of time. And the idea is that, 20, 25 or so years now pass, and Eva has died, and Maddie saved up more than enough money to pay off the mortgage on the house. And so Basil's 30 years old now. So 30 years have passed. He's a 30-year-old man. And Maddie Michael has money saved away, and she owns the house. She was able to pay off the mortgage after Eva dies. Eva's granddaughter has moved on, a while ago, has become independent, but Basil, 30 years old, still living home with mom and taking a lot of advantage of it, if you guys noticed here. And he doesn't do anything around the house to help. He goes out all the time, and you see this on page 41 where Basil's in the kitchen and Maddie's cooking him for him like she does all the time. And, she's hoping he'll go to church with her and then help with some of the chores. But he's like, nope, got some places to go. Got to go do things. And it's at the top of page 41. It's Sunday, Basil, Maddie says. You've been running all weekend. I thought you were going to stay home and help me with the yard. Look, Basil says, I'm only going out for a few minutes. I told you I'll cut the grass, and I will. So stop hassling me. Maddie remained silent because she didn't want to argue with him while he ate. He had a nervous stomach all his life, and she didn't want him to get cramps or run out of the house refusing to eat at all. Guys, he's 30 years old. She doubted that she would see him any more that day. The idea is that he just goes out all day anyhow. And she wanted to be certain he got at least one decent meal. Again, he's 30 years old. She's babying him kind of thing. And she relents and says, all right, but at least have some toast and all before you go. And he responds a few lines down, okay, I'll see you in a while, he said, and pushed his chair back. Hey, could you lend me a couple of dollars to get some gas for the car? Basil saw that she had opened her mouth to refuse, so he went on. I don't want it for today, but tomorrow. I gotta go looking for another job. I don't pick up my check from the last place until Thursday, and I don't want to waste 4 days sitting around here doing nothing. He bent down, whispered in her ear, you know I'm not the kind of guy to hang around and let a woman support him. Seeing his mom smile, he straightened up and said, but I'd make a good pimp, wouldn't I, Mama? And he pantomimed, putting on a cocked hat and strutted in the middle of the floor. And of course, the mom laughs and gets the money out of her wallet and gives it to him. And off he goes. And kind of the idea, guys, is this is something over the years just repeats. He's just kind of he's been coddled. Think about it this way: he's been coddled by Maddie Michael all of his life. So what reason would he have to move on? She feeds him and everything, and he goes out, probably does what he wants to do, gets money from her and everything. But this day, he doesn't come home. It's on page 43, middle of the page. Maddie sat there for hours, and still Basil did not come. She looked through the windows at the long grass and decided to cut it the next day after work. His mom is in her 60s. If her back didn't bother her too much, it was becoming more difficult each year to keep up the house alone. She got up from the couch stiffly and climbed the steps toward her bedroom. Her house slippers scraped the edges of the steps. Irresponsible, his counselors had said in school. High-natured, she had replied in her heart. Hadn't he said that they were always picking on him? Everyone had been against him, except her. She had been the refuge when he ran from school to job to job. They wanted too much. She had been so proud that he always turned to her, fled to her when he accused them of demanding the impossible. She had demanded nothing at all these years, never doubting that he would be there when needed, which he hasn't been, right? She had carefully pruned his spirit to rest only in the enclaves of her will, and she willed so little that he had been tempted to return again and again over the last 30 years because his just being had been enough to satisfy her needs. Again, right? No reason to leave or anything kind of idea. He still hadn't come home though, and she's asleep. And again, he's 30 years old. And she gets a phone call in the middle of the night that he's in the police station, arrested, got into a barroom fight, and killed the person. And boom, life turned upside down. Her son in jail, barroom fight, manslaughter. And he hears from she's able to talk with Basil, and he's crying like, a little boy, and son of a bitches, they got me, and all that. And of course, Maddie runs to the police station and finds out all the information, from the police, and she's demanding to see her son, but of course, she can't until he's arraigned and all of that, And I want to read on page 46 the description of the police sergeant when Maddie goes in distraught looking for her son. Sergeant Manchester is his name. And this is toward the bottom of page 46. Sergeant Manchester massaged the tightness between his sleepy eyes and looked wearily at the desperate bewilderment that stood in front of him, Maddie Michael. Any pity that he might have felt for this old black woman lay buried under the memory of 100 or more such faces on countless other mornings like this one. It never ended. Someone's somebody, all persistently filed in to bruise their heads upon the rigid walls of due process. And by the way, the point of view, if you notice, you might think it's third person limited, but it's omniscient. It's a storyteller telling a story, and so you get the point of view here, through the omniscience of the sergeant. And this is the first time you break away from, the point of view of Maddie and Eva and stuff to see it from the white law enforcement point of view. And here's Maddie, distraught. Her whole life, everything she lives for is in jail. And he's seen this hundreds of times, and his sympathy has disappeared and just buried behind all the memories of one after another every morning, a mother coming in, with the same sort of situation. So it makes it sad, right? I mean, Maddie's not unique. This is not a special case kind of thing. Her son Basil is one of hundreds he's had to deal with over his career or in jail kind of thing. Um, and so what you get then, page 47 to 48, is, and the frustration level for you, I'm sure, as a reader with Maddie Michael just keeps going up kind of thing, is that Maddie Michael refuses the pub letting Basil just have a public defender, which would be um, free, or at least really cheap. Only the best, for her son, for Maddie Michael. And she spends a ton of money on a private lawyer. And this private lawyer, on page 47, I forget his name, Cecil, I think. Yeah, Cecil Garvin, is saying to himself, so we hear his thoughts about why didn't she just take the public defender? This is an easy case. He can be, gotten out, pretty quickly, or at least on probation kind of thing. She didn't need to hire, but his attitude, if you notice, is kind of crooked. Thank God, he says, for such concerned but poor mothers like this, because they end up just giving me a lot of money thinking I can do a better job than the public defender. And it's really kind of awful. It's on the bottom of page 47. The lawyer wondered why she hadn't let the public defender take care of such a simple case. He would be receiving a huge fee. So Maddie Michael's probably spending away most of her savings. A huge fee for something that wouldn't even require a trial by jury if it was in the next county. Well, he sighed and put his glasses back on. Thank God for ignorance of the law and frantic mothers. So, I don't know if you noticed, but Maddie Michael, still a single Black mother, even though her son is 30 years old now, up against the law, up against the police, not knowing how this kind of thing works, but being duped in a way by this lawyer who should just tell her the public defender will be able to do exactly what I'm going to do, and you're tossing away your money at me, but he doesn't, kind of idea. You got the Gloria Naylor's giving you the sense of the system, and how it's working, kind of against the African American single mom here, kind of thing. And then some time passes, probably several days, and they get a trial date for 2 weeks, down the road, and the mother gets to visit Basil. And it probably disgusted you, Basil's attitude towards his mother, and I won't read it necessarily here, but, basically the first thing he says to her when she comes in to see him in the jail visiting room is, okay, so when are you getting me out of here? And I have nothing more to talk about unless it's you're springing me from here. And the mother keeps trying to tell him, your trial date's in 2 weeks. Just get through the 2 weeks, because the bail is huge. It's a huge amount of money for the bail. But no, and he goes on about, how he's been, how he's getting beaten up in jail, and he hates the food, and he just wants to be home. He manipulates the mom. And of course, in the bottom of page 49, you get, I'm sure when you're reading this, like when I first read it, this sinking feeling, knowing that Maddie in these few days is throwing it all away, because the lawyer is really happy. 2 weeks, by the way, isn't a long time to wait in a county jail for a trial date. And of course, I don't know if you guys know, you have to put up a lot of, particularly in a manslaughter case, a lot of money to get somebody out of the jail, and waiting for that trial date. But Maddie tells the lawyer, I want to pay the bail. And the lawyer's like, my God, we're assuming it's maybe $200,000, which would be a ton of money back then. My God, just wait for the 2 weeks. And Maddie says, well, I own my house. I can use that. And the lawyer reminds her, yes, you can, but remember that if your son doesn't show up for the trial in 2 weeks when he's out on bail, they're going to take your house. You'll lose it. And the mother's like, fine. She just wants her son home, kind of thing. And of course, the son is all happy to be home and jumping and thanking her mom and helping around the house for the 2 weeks and, Basil being good to him and, all of that. And then when the day before the trial comes, suddenly Basil gets all spooked and talks about how, I know they're going to put me back in jail, and I don't trust the system and everything. And when Basil drives his mom to work, by the way, they have a car. Now she's going to lose her car. Basil never comes home, springs the bail. So Maddie Michael loses everything, guys. She's lost her savings paying for a lawyer she really didn't need to spend on, to to help with the trial, and then puts up the house and whatever money she has left on bail. And Basil blows off the trial, and she loses that. And by the way, again, if you guys don't know how like the bail bonding works, whatever you put up, like as collateral, the money or your house, whatever property, if the person does not show up for the trial, or breaks the probation, it's gone. Money's gone. And for Maddie Michael, that was everything. 30 years she saved. The 30 years she saved living with Eva, a nice life, the money she put in that house, gone. And so this is how that's how the story ends, where it began with, remember I said it's a frame narrative story where Maddie Michael is standing in front of her new residence, Brewster Place, the last resort, cheap government housing. And so we learn kind of in this wonderful story and terribly tragic. You learn of her origins, why she leaves the South, the life she led, to try to get her to raise her son, get herself on her feet, the wonderful life she had with the woman who took her in, but all the work she did to save the money, to buy that place after Eva dies, and to have it all disappear. And here she is. She's in her 60s, and kind of the idea, and she knows it because Maddie Michael admits it. Brewster Place is the end of the line for her. I mean, she's too old. She's not going to go, build up savings again, buy another house. She's, having a hard enough time just maintaining a house on her own. Anyhow, this is it for her. So it does leave. There's a lot of issues in the story that you could use for writing with about race, certainly, and many other things too. For instance, like I asked in the last video, to keep in mind how you feel about Maddie Michael sacrificing everything for her boy, even when he's 30 years old and, is treating her the way he is. Certainly, I'm sure a lot of you felt really frustrated with that. I do too, and Gloria Naylor is a good writer. She knows that it would be way too easy and not very literary just to make everything 100% sympathetic for Maddie Michael. Here's a woman where everything just went wrong for her. She is right to blame for some of her downfall. She was way too trusting of her son and doted on him way too much and sacrificed her whole life for her child. Which is essentially in the end, symbolically, she did. She sacrificed her entire life. Here she is. She's left at this dead end at Brewster Place, kind of notion. And so Gloria Naylor is challenging you in that sense about the sympathy one has for Maddie Michael. And I'm sure if you're like me, a big part of you sympathizes with Maddie Michael. How can you not? Where another little part of you, not as big, a little part of you is angry at her. Why did you do this? Why didn't you take the advice that Eva kept giving you way back when Basil was just an infant? That you got to let go of it. You got to have your own life. You got to let them have their own, failures and things of that sort. So how far do you go to covet those things like your child? But the other things of the story is you can see it sort of gives you a sense of place. right? Setting. The different settings that she's in Brewster Place being the dead end setting, the bucolic origins of the rural South that she escapes from, the racism, her father, the the setting of how somebody could be kind, a setting of a home, of safety, and all of that. And then, like I said, the last resort kind of setting, and how easily that safety of home, particularly if you're black, can poof disappear. But also, you do see the issues of injustice, the injustice of law, obviously the systemic racism that's behind things in the police force, and that Basil's not a good person, obviously, not at all, selfish, and he killed somebody in a barroom fight, even though it sounds like from the lawyer being manslaughter, it wasn't really entirely his fault. At the same time, he did it, but nonetheless, everything is against Basil with the law here. He's not going to have as easy a time getting off on this in the end. But also just the way the law takes advantage of the poor and the callousness of it. The one more poor single black woman whose son has committed a crime kind of thing that's at work. But anyhow, there's a lot to think about with this story. So listen, what I am going to do, not today. This was a hectic day, but by tomorrow, definitely, I will have a rundown, an overview that I'll type up and post to Blackboard about the story I just discussed, Maddie May. And it'll be similar to the rundown I gave for the story Dawn that I put on there a few days ago, so that you can have that as something you can look at or use as reference when you want to write, if you want to write about the story Maddie May from Maddie Michael, sorry, from the Women of Brewster Place. The semester is getting long, guys, but we're nearing an end. All right, so thank you. Sorry for the technical problems today. Hopefully this will help you outdoor. Okay, guys? And here's the end of part 3. Now I'm going to consider getting a haircut. See you guys.